Hello and welcome to our chat 5. I'm here, Noah Bradley, with Danielle.
Hello.
And we have two very awesome guests, not here in Australia. Guys, go ahead and introduce yourselves.
All right, I'm Phil Liu, and I am an environment artist at 343 Industries.
My name is Joey Lenz, and I'm also an environment artist at 343.
Cool. Good to be talking to you guys. Pretty excited about this stuff.
Yeah.
Sad I've never really got to hang out with you guys in real life, but hey, whatever. Hopefully someday. So let's get a little bit of your background here. How do you guys get started with this stuff?
Yeah, how do you know each other as well?
Yeah, how do you guys know each other?
Okay, well, it's a little bit of a long story, so here we go. So I started off, and my first college was the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and I studied industrial design, and it was pretty much a major just to please my parents and keep them happy, while I can still draw and do whatever I want. While I was studying, I remember my freshman year, I picked up this book from Ballistic that was called Matte Painting 2, and I remember there was this absolutely gorgeous like sci-fi landscape of all these spaceships just racing through. I was like, I don't know like how to do this, but I want my art to be this good before I graduate, or else this it's like I would never get a job, or I just wanted to be the best that I could possibly could. And after about 3 years, I realized, industrial design really isn't what I wanted to do. So I transferred school to Savannah College of Art and Design, commonly known as SCAD. And at the time, I actually primarily wanted to be a 2D concept artist in the industry, and working for Blizzard, because I had my share of World of Warcraft addiction back in the day. And
but before you go on, you were saying before that you figured out that industrial design wasn't the route that you wanted to go. How did you come to that conclusion?
I think it was just primarily not really. I mean, I think I can honestly now working at 343, I can appreciate a lot of the principles, but I think actual like product designs and doing designing different cups and toasters, for me, I really wasn't all that interested in. It's just something that I didn't really care about. But surprisingly, I'll take the skills like, hey, draw a front view, a side view of a cup, and then during class I'll be like drawing swords and guns and like robotic mechs. And so I was like, well, if I'm spending most of my time doing this stuff anyways, might as well get serious with it and actually see if I can make something out of it.
Sure. Did was there a lot of opportunity in the state that you lived in for concept art, or was that a little bit barren over there?
There's absolutely no opportunity whatsoever in the cornfield lands of Illinois. I think there used to be a bunch of studios up in the Chicagoland area, but eventually, like Midway or EA Chicago. But by the time I think I was like a sophomore or something like that, they've all either closed down or they moved away, and Chicago pretty much became this kind of a barren wasteland for game development.
Yeah. There's better places to go for that. So, what about you, Joey? How did you get started?
Yeah, for me, I would say like what first inspired me actually started when I was about the age of 5. My parents bought me a Super Nintendo for Christmas, and Super Mario World, they got me that with the game, or the system, and when I played it, you're Mario running around, you hit that question mark box, and Yoshi pops up. And it was actually that moment, like, I was like, whoa, how do they make this stuff, So, like, from that moment on, like, I just thought all the art and technology and everything associated with, like, that form of entertainment was just magic to me. So I did whatever I could to try learning it, even though I lived out in an area where, kind of like Illinois, I come from Missouri. There's nothing there except cornfields as well and cattle.
Nothing.
So, yeah.
So boring states to live in.
Yes. I was there for the first 18 years of my life, but there was nothing there as far as like for me to learn that kind of medium. So I just drew a lot and did what I can. I didn't even have internet really at home. It was dial-up, but it was really bad. So would go to school, and instead of actually doing my homework, I'd play around the internet trying to like learn this kind of stuff and everything. So, and then when I got into college, I actually went to the School of Communication Arts first, and it's located in North Carolina, actually. So I got an associate's in animation because I wanted to do games, and everyone was telling me like, this is the way to go. So I'm like, okay. But once I got out, I realized that the degree wasn't as important as spending more time on polishing up your craft and becoming good at that. So after 2 years, I realized pretty quickly that I wasn't actually ready for the industry. I tried for a lot of jobs at a lot of game studios, but they were kind of telling me like I need more practice, my reel's not quite there yet. So I actually also attended the Savannah College of Art and Design, like Phil did, way before him actually. And I actually went there on like last resort kind of whim thing. Like my instructors at my previous schooling told me, it's like, yeah, I went to this college. Why don't you try there? I was telling me it was great and everything. Like, okay, whatever. So I applied there. Oh, that's really how I was at the time because I didn't know better. So I applied there. I got accepted and got a master, or eventually worked up and got a master's in visual effects. So I was going to be heading out to LA with a lot of my other friends that I knew there and everything, but we all know that there's a lot of turbulence in that industry right now, and and then Phil, who was my roommate at the time, he was like, hey Joey, why don't you try games? And I was like, okay. So kind of went that route last minute and start working on my portfolio. And then last year is when I got into Microsoft because the fall prior to that, I was selected by the dean of the game department at SCAD to interview with them. So I'm like, okay, why not? I didn't think much of it because I was actually working on my portfolio at the time and was not ready to look for jobs because this is like a game portfolio for me. So it's like I was starting from the ground up again instead of doing special effects. And I had an interview with them, and by the time I was done with it, they asked me, do you have any comments or questions for us? And I'm like, hey, I'm going to be traveling up to Seattle, in a few months. Would you guys like to meet again? And they're like, yeah, sure. So I went up there, met with them again, had another interview, and then after a lot of talking and everything, I secured an internship with them. And once I got up here at Microsoft, I was on the publishing side of the Xbox division, so it's pretty cool to be a part of that. And I had to return back to school because I had one more quarter to go through, but I couldn't. I was talking with 343, but I couldn't secure a job with them at the time because I had to leave state at that time to get my master's. So I told them, I was like, hey guys, why don't you give me like some kind of project or art test or something to work on to kind of train in your style and everything. And they loved the idea. So during my last quarter, I was actually working on classes and talking with 343 and working on this project with them the whole time. And eventually, they gave me the call, and here I am.
Yeah,
Nice.
that's fantastic.
That's cool.
And it seems, I mean, to me, just talking to you guys, it's very obvious to me that you're quite self-starter in a lot of ways. Even just by the way you speak. When I was working in studios, I worked with a lot of artists, and a lot of artists would get by just kind of grunting and pointing. Whereas, both of you are very articulate, and I think that's a major asset. And I think that's something that if anyone kind of wants to get in that industry, I think it's fairly important.
Yeah.
You see?
Oh, for sure. So that's how you landed 343. What about you, Phil? How'd you get that?
Pretty interesting story. It's kind of like, in some weird ways, like both of our stories are pretty intertwined. So we actually, I think, met when I was my second year at SCAD, and he was showing me some of the stuff he was doing. I was like, oh man, like your 3D stuff is pretty cool, and I was showing some of my 2D stuff, and he's like, oh man, your 2D stuff is awesome. Let's just collab and just work on crazy projects together. And of course, back in the day, we were young, we didn't know any better, and we're like, okay, let's do some of the most crazy, out there, ambitious projects that like no one even would attempt to SCAD would even attempt or even dream of. And so I remember we worked on this one project where it was for something like, it was like for 7 months straight, like every single day we were like killing ourselves for like 8 to 12 hours, and actually like eventually got the project done. And I think that was the time when we started to realize, okay, things are difficult, but it's possible, and also starting to look smart. And I think it was around that time where I was slowly starting to get more and more I guess practice and exposure to the 3D world, and I was like, hey, this is equally just as fun as 2D, so might as well just kind of keep going down this path and see maybe what happens, and maybe do a little 2D on the side. And so I think this was back in 2011 when I was just graduated from my undergrad, and I was trying to look for a job and send out a bunch of applications everywhere. And I remember hearing no from every single studio except for Sony Santa Monica. And they're like, hey, we like your stuff. Here's an art test, and if you pass, you get to work on God of War Ascension. I was like, wow, okay, this is pretty awesome. And so I was like, okay, forget 2D for a while, and then I'll just do the 3D thing. And I still remember to this day, it was probably one of the most spectacular, bombed art tests I've ever. And I just honestly, probably a good portion of half of the stuff I was like, I didn't really know what I was doing, and it was it was a kind of a devastating time for me. Like, oh man, I tried this hard, and just to only get a no. And I think that through that, it was definitely a good learning opportunity, because I remember being down the dumps, like, okay, why is this happening? Why is this happening? I was like, I put in this much work. Why is this not working? And I was like, well, maybe it's because there's some things that I haven't learned, I don't know, and it's like I'm pretty passionate about what I do, and I want to just keep going. And it's like, well, let's just keep going, learn from this, try to figure out what I didn't do right, and just patiently, build up more portfolio pieces, and just learn from the best, do whatever I can to find information, even if it's outside of class, from Noman, from CG Society. I remember traveling to Massive Black Workshop and attending a bunch of online classes, and pretty much I think it was the 2011 workshop, and I actually met I was going there kind of as a tutor. I was like, whatever, it's gonna be cool, but I don't think I could get anything out of it. But I remember meeting one person that kind of made it all worthwhile, and his name is Shawn Mitchell, and he was I think one of the last 3D artist at Massive Black. And so he was showing me a lot of tips and tricks, like, hey, do this is how you focused on 3D not being technical, being artistic. This is how you speed up your pipelines. So he was just showing me the ropes and everything. He's like, oh man, this is super awesome. And so I went after the workshop. I just went home and just practiced, and I kept on applying to different companies. And it's like this interesting cycle of every time I would try and go for the absolute best studio, they'd give me an art test, and then I wouldn't get the job. I think I probably did about 3 or 4 art tests. I just pretty much bombed it before eventually I think I landed my first gig at a medium-sized studio called High Voltage Software, and they're in the Chicagoland area, and I worked on Saints Row 4. And actually, I remember now, so at that time, Joey was interning at Microsoft, and it was pretty interesting, how that whole thing came about. I remember it was one of our chairs who, had something worked out with Microsoft where we would do a student project for them, and then they were like, hey, Phil, you be a part of this? I was like, yeah, sure, whatever, I guess. And turns out, the project was pretty fun, and Microsoft was impressed enough that they came back to SCAD, and they started to, get some, they just started to, ask people for internships and different opportunities, and I think that's how you got the job. Mm-hmm. And so eventually, I worked at High Voltage Software for about, I think, 8 months or so, and then Joey got the job at 343, and he vouched for me, and then eventually got him the job at 343.
Yeah. Nice, that's awesome.
It's really cool.
I think it's a good point to repeat on how you got turned down quite a few times, and how important that is. Because I think a lot of guys trying to start out or get their first job think that they're gonna hop out of school and land an awesome job. And while that certainly happens sometimes, I think it's worth noting that it rarely happens that way. I think it's pretty normal for us as artists to get turned down again and again and again and again before we get anything. I've done tons of art tests that I got turned down for. I've done tons of competitions that I got turned down for. Tons of jobs that I got turned down for. But I think the important thing to take away from that is just kind of keep going when you do get turned down. And the people that do land all the awesome jobs are usually the people too stubborn to give up when they do get turned down. At least that's what I've found.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing that came out, Phil, was when you weren't successful in some of the art tests. What you did was, in my opinion, really intelligent. Where you took a step back and you said, "Why wasn't this working?" Basically reassessing how you went about applying and how you do your work. And I think that's a really good thing to kind of point out as well, because you don't want to keep doing the same thing if it's not working, right? You just want to come back, improve here, improve there, and then push forward. And I think that was a very mature thing to do.
I think kind of relating to the idea of failure, I've also had my fair share of art tests that I bombed. I've been turned down by so many companies. I even had one day where I was probably turned down by 4 of the really big companies like Pixar, DreamWorks, Digital Domain, and another one off the top of my head. I think Rhythm and Hues, all in one day. So yeah, it was not a good time for me. But it's one of those things that, like you're saying, it's all about like tenacity. It's like, okay, what am I not doing right? Because for the longest time, I was really too stubborn to understand what I was doing wrong, I guess, because when you're young, some people don't listen to others. They just kind of do their own thing. And I think that's where I was having troubles, because I was, at that time, not adaptive. I was way too stubborn. I thought I knew what I needed to do to get a job. But when you get turned down that many times, it's like, okay, maybe something's not going right on my end. So that's when I got my bachelor's at SCAT. That I was done with school. I didn't have a job lined up. And I realized, okay, I need to do some stuff differently. So I actually decided to go on a whim. Well, not really a whim, but it's to go back to SCAD for my master's, not because for the degree, but to allow myself to have enough time to focus on what the industry is actually looking for instead of thinking I know what it's looking for. And then also with the networking and all the hardware and software they have there, all the resources made it a lot easier for me. So there was a lot of failure on my end too before I ended up getting in 343.
Yeah. So with both of you, you've obviously gone through your share of failure. Were you guys still roommates at that time, and were you helping each other through, or did you feel that you bonded a bit more closely because you both had very similar mentalities?
You want me to take on that, or
why don't you take it?
Okay, so yeah, we were roommates. I guess about half the time we were at SCAD. So we worked on projects together. We've been through a lot together, and every time like one of us failed and the other one was working on their projects. So like I remember Phil, when you were like taking some of the art tests for like Sony Santa Monica, you were kind of devastated a little bit and frustrated. But it's like, okay, why did you? We looked at what you did wrong and like what can we do to improve this? What are they looking for? So at that time, it kind of opened up the door to like, okay, research further into the company, understand what the industry trends are, and kind of learn from there. And then with me, like let's say like when I would go through like a lot of failures and get turned down, I mean, you would kind of do the same thing for me as well, as far as like have me take a step back, have me look at like what I was doing wrong, and I was probably pretty stubborn, didn't quite listen to a lot of that stuff at the time, but through a lot of people beating it into me, I finally realized, okay, I'm not doing this and this right. So we were really bouncing off of each other and really helping each other out through that whole thing.
Do we lose?
You guys still there?
I think we might have lost connection.
You guys there? You guys there?
Yeah,
Hey.
sorry about that. My computer decided to, for the first time ever, to have a blue screen of death.
Hey, you
Yeah.
work for Microsoft and you had blue screen of death. No coincidence.
Yeah, so good job.
Sorry about that.
Anyways, I think we're back, even though it says I'm in this chat twice. I think it's working, as far as I know. So cool. Proceed wherever we were.
Yeah, sorry. It was. I think you were chatting about helping each other out through the difficult times.
Yeah, as like for example, when Phil would get turned down by an art test, and at that moment, he might be feeling kind of down, and I wasn't in that same state of mind, so I could be a friend and kind of pull him back from the situation. Like, hey man, it's okay. Here's what you're doing wrong. Maybe do a little bit more research into the industry trends, understand what's going on, understand where you need to improve, and still looking at it as a failure, learn it as an opportunity to where you can grow from. So, and as for me, the same thing. If I got turned down by, like, say, 4 companies like I did before, and one day, I would have Phil right there, and he'd be like, hey, you showed me this way, now I'm going to show you the same thing, and, like, pull me back a little bit. And at the time, being quite stubborn with that kind of stuff, like, I had to eventually learn the hard way. It's like, hey, you can't be stubborn thinking you know what's the industry is all about. You kind of actually have to study it before you can just get into it. And I feel like a lot of young artists kind of think they know what's going on with the industry when they don't do their research.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Because, I look at, like, guys, just for concept art, for instance, they try to get into concept art, and they have no idea what concept art actually looks like. Because they look at, like, I don't know, like, finished Blizzard cinematics, for instance, and they think that's what concept art looks like. And it's not.
But it's partly also because that's what companies put out, and they say this is concept art,
Right.
Because
like,
no one wants to put out crap work. So.
No, but like a lot of concept art is pretty awful looking stuff. Because like you just crank out this stuff so fast, and I don't think a lot of people realize that. And I can imagine the same thing goes for 3D work. I'm not sure exactly because I don't have any experience with it. But maybe you could talk a little bit about that from your experience of how the 3D industry differs from the public perception of it.
Sorry, before we go on, there was a point that you brought up, Phil, where you were saying, both of you, where do a bit more research into what the industry needs and the trends and that sort of thing. How did you guys specifically go about that, doing that sort of thing?
I'll let you take it.
Okay. Well, for me, I think meeting Shawn Mitchell at the Massive Black workshop was like, it was just unbelievable. I think just by chance, he was just showing me a lot of stuff. Like, this is how you model faster. This is how you get stuff done. This is how you make sure that everything is working good artistically and technically. I remember after I went home, I think I took a character creation class with one of the character artists at Sony Santa Monica at the time. So it was it just happened to be offered on CG Society. I was like, all right, I'm going to take it. And so I learned a lot about what their studio values, kind of what the actual bar is at, for something like a high-end video games studio is, and kind of just really how long it takes to do something. And it was kind of this interesting thing where, I think also at the same time, there was a lot of guest speakers coming to our school, from places like Bethesda. I think there's a couple other places like Chaos Studio who did Homefront, and every single time, any speaker would come in, I would just, pull them aside and ask them a bunch of questions like, hey, specifically, how do I do this? Is this what they're looking for? Is this up to the technical visual bar? Where do you see, games going in the future? How close, is game to the film industry, and so forth? And so I think it was about something like that for about 2 years of just being really, really smart and finding, tutorials from Yeoman Workshop or any place I could find. If Naughty Dog released a tutorial, like, hey, this is how we do our texture, I was like, oh, I'm just gonna grab it up, read it, and then practice. And just kind of seeking, I guess, knowledge from credible sources, because I think that most artists who do work in, at least in the 3D, and they're fairly open about their techniques and processes. It's just like you just gotta go out there and find it, and it's like don't even be afraid to ask them a bunch of questions. I remember before I applied to 343 Industries, I contacted Shawn who happens, right after the workshop, he started working at 343, and I was like, hey, Shawn, can you take a look at my portfolio and tell me, what am I doing right, what am I doing wrong, and he gave me some really good feedbacks, like fix this, touch up on that, make sure you have this, and this, and so forth. And I think that, just being, learning from the best and people who are professional working industry, finding knowledge wherever you can, and then just practicing and failures.
Awesome. Also, I wanted to touch on something you said before as well, Joey, where you were saying that initially you felt that you knew everything about the industry and how to get a job, but you had to take your, take that down a peg and try to actually find out what people needed as opposed to just kind of assuming. And I think what you were saying, where you need to knock your ego down a peg, I think to be a commercial artist, you almost need to have a little bit of that as well. It's a field that's extraordinarily difficult to make a living in. So it's almost like you need to be a bit presumptuous like that, but also recognizing when you do hit the limits of your own knowledge and kind of pulling back from that. So I think there needs to be a bit of a balance of both, because I think it's also quite easy for people to go out seeking knowledge all the time, and they're basically like this, young sapling getting blown all directions in the wind. But you still need to develop that strong compass within yourself as well. I mean, I'm not sure whether you sort of agree with that or not, but what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would say that when it comes to the industry, yeah, you need to be confident in yourself, but I do believe in maybe more of a silent confidence, or being modest when it's appropriate, but also know where you stand as far as your skills. I mean, you can't be unrealistic and then you're the best, but also if you're good, you shouldn't just knock yourself down for it either. So I do believe that being humble in the sense that if someone's trying to teach you something, absorb all the information. Don't act like you know what, if you already know the stuff, just still be quiet and just absorb anything that anyone has to, teach you. So that's the sense of being humble, and, but at the same time, in this industry, when you're in a studio, you're going to sometimes be working really long hours. So people want to be surrounded by those that, they can at least tolerate from 7, 8 in the morning until 7, 8 at night or later. So you're kind of one big dysfunctional family. And you want to be around people that, you can get along with, not just someone that you could sit by, each other's desk and work on the computer together, but someone that you would actually, go to the bars with or hang out with outside of work, because, you're more than just coworkers, you're friends and family at the same time.
So now you mentioned kind of the studio life. Let's talk a little bit about what it's been like to start working in a studio. How's it been at 343? Do you guys like it there?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, it's a really great place to be. Everyone there, to be honest, is better than us. We're we're still the young artists there compared to everyone else who has 10, 15 years of industry experience. So it's great to learn from them and being part of a process like that and getting to work on a game like Halo. Oh,
yeah, definitely. I think that, when 343, Microsoft, they did pull a world-class studio together. They really made it. You've got guys coming from not just anywhere in, the video game industry, people who worked on Mass Effect, people who did a bunch of Call of Duties, but, people from Industrial Light and Magic, people from Weta, these, it's just, the amount of talent here is just absolutely crazy.
Yeah. And
I think that, surprisingly enough, obviously with Halo, it's a lot of hours, but because it's, 343 is owned by Microsoft, the project managers and others, they do whatever they can to make sure that, hey, outside of just working on Halo and killing yourself, make sure that, there's some time to take a break, to relax, and to recharge. And so, I mean, they definitely do whatever they can, and I think that's one of the actual better places where, that life, having a life outside of work actually matters.
Yeah, that's good to hear that they're good about that. I mean, 343 is amazing. I mean, they did a killer job with Halo 4 for sure. I was impressed with how they handled the series. Are you guys fans of the genre in general? And I guess, what's your gaming history? I mean, you said, Joey, that you started out gaming. Are you kind of both the same way, constant gaming and whatnot?
Okay, so when I was younger, I used to play a lot of games, but as I got older, doing 3D art and everything takes up a huge amount of time, even outside of work, to become good at it. or attempt to become good at it. So to be completely honest with you, I don't play games these days, even though I work in the game industry. Like the other day, I was kind of straightening up some stuff near the TV and accidentally turned on Phil's PS4, and I literally had to tell him, "Hey Phil, how do you turn this off?"
Nice. Yeah, I can relate to that. Like, I work on games occasionally and barely ever play them anymore. It's really sad.
Yeah.
I definitely have my World of Warcraft addiction. So back in college, that was my first college. That's like all I would do, and I was like, okay, I need to actually make a living instead of just playing games all day. And I think eventually just put my nose to the grinder, put games aside for a long time, and stop playing them and start working on them. And I think right now I'm trying to strike a balance where I still play games occasionally. Both for because they're fun to play, and now I'll be like, ooh, how do they do this? Oh, this part's pretty. It's like you can try and see where the visual bar is, where the competition is, and just making sure that my skill still matches up to that.
Yeah, I think it's worthwhile to at least keep somewhat current on the games industry if you want to work in it. But I think a lot of people go overboard with how many games they do play.
And they call it research.
Yeah, thinking it's like research, and like some amounts fine, but like you got to put in a killer number of hours to be able to make it in this industry. Both of you guys worked your butts off to get those first jobs.
Yeah.
And now you get to work even harder in the studio. So,
there you go.
And outside.
So with because obviously you put in a lot of hours in the studios now, do you still have I'm not sure what your marital status, but do you still put in a lot of time outside of hours, like learning new technologies, learning new workflows, and just pushing your skills in other areas?
Absolutely. We typically work about 40 hours a week at the studio, so it's actually just typical work hours during non-crunch time. But as far as outside of studios, we probably put in about, I would say, anywhere from 10 to 30 hours outside of work a week. Just learning new stuff, whether it be new techniques in the game industry, stuff that's on the horizon. Like currently, we're both trying to learn Modo right now because there's some tools in there we're more fascinated by than how we used to do it in Maya. And so yeah, always trying to learn new stuff, trying to keep ahead of the curve, and that's how you keep yourself marketable in this kind of industry. You always have to learn.
That being said, though, I still think that it's incredibly important to have a balanced life.
Oh yeah.
I think I'm pretty sure I say to all of us, there's probably one point in all of our lives where we just worked so many hours that there's a danger of just getting burnt out. I know that for me it happened almost like probably about 2 times where I was getting dangerously close to getting burnt. I was like, okay, I just gotta take a break. And so it's definitely difficult, but I try and maintain as much of a work balance as possible, with whatever little time I have outside.
So for the people who have never experienced burnout before, what does it sort of feel like? Can you explain it in any way?
I think honestly, it's like every day you wake up, you turn on your computer, you go to work, and you look at your stuff, and it's just like, I don't care. I really don't give a shit about this. And I think it's difficult because it's one of your passions, and you want to do a good job, but I think whatever it may be, just because being too close to the subject matter, not really understanding the subject matter, or not understanding technique and trying to brute force your way through it. I think that it works a little bit at the beginning, but I think after a while, you're just going day in, day out, and not really, I guess, taking in new information, new techniques, see how is my art relevant to everywhere else. I think that it creates this very destructive bubble, and so I'm trying to do whatever I can to kind of avoid having that happen again.
I kind of feel that to add to your comment, Phil, I kind of feel that when you're much younger and kind of new to the industry, you start putting as many hours as you can into a thing, and that's going to get you the job because you're working hard, you're going to be the best there is, and all that. You have a lot of energy for that. But I feel as you get a little bit older, a little bit wiser, have a little more life experience, you realize I think to be a better artist is not about how many hours you put into it. It's about having a little bit of variety in life, having making sure that you're healthy, making sure you eat right, take care of yourself, and having some other hobbies that are not art related, so you don't burn yourself out. So the idea of having a work balance kind of life, I think, is absolutely essential to becoming an actual good artist. more so than just putting in as many hours. Because there's a point, we're all human. There's a point to where if you're working 16 hours in one day, your work is not going to be that good at that point. So I do feel that it's important to have other hobbies and variety in your life than just working all the time.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It just feels like whenever you're creating artwork, the more rounded you are as a person, the more life experiences that you can bring, and all the emotions that you feel from living a more full life, you can bring that into your work as well. I'm not sure if Noah agrees, but Noah's fantastic at that life.
I like having a life. The idea of I was never the guy pulling all-nighters every night in art school.
Sure, you did sometimes.
No.
No.
I got through art school without all-nighters. I didn't do a single all-nighter. I got 9 hours of sleep every night. I had something of a social life. I mean, yes, I worked really hard, but I don't really get the glorification of working, 16 hours a day every day for your whole life. I mean, yes, you do have to work hard, but at a certain point, you're not going to learn any more by putting more hours into it. Occasionally, you need to take a break, step back, and let your brain actually process all the stuff you're doing.
I remember reading one of your blog posts where you were saying, working smarter as opposed to, the whole 10,000 hour rule.
Because, I mean, yes, I put in a lot of hours, but all the hours I did put in were very focused. And I saw a lot of people working way more hours than me that were progressing far slower than I was. Because they were just mindlessly doing exercises and mindlessly doing all of this stuff, thinking that if they did it enough, that they'd suddenly get better.
Yep.
But something that I think you guys mentioned several times now is how much you've researched and really mindful about what you needed to do, how you needed to progress, what were the things that were really important to work on. And I think that's a large part of why you guys have done so well, is that really focused work. I mean, yes, working very hard, but also working very hard on the right thing.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, for sure. I remember just in retrospect, looking back at that crazy project, when we're killing ourselves, for 6 or 7 months straight, and it's if we were to even attempt it now, we probably could use much smarter technique and get it done in a fraction of the time and not remotely kill ourselves in the process and have fun.
I think that project actually told us a lot about it's good to be ambitious, but you also have to be realistic about your end goal. And one of my teachers had a great phrase for that for students who were really ambitious but didn't really understand scope. He called it Lucasitis. Made a lot of sense too. So we went through that. It took we were spending about 7 months, 12 hours a day each working on this project, never taking a break. And by the time you're done with it and you actually take a step back, you realize, we really didn't need to do something like that. It's all about quality, not quantity, and really being focused on what your end goal is instead of just going all crazy and not really knowing what you're doing.
Yeah, that's actually.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. I was just thinking that's what Joey was saying. It's very true. When you're applying for a studio gig, I've seen a lot of portfolios where people have these gigantic, massive environments that's really mediocre. They execute it. Whereas honestly, more often than not, it's if you want to work at a top tier studio, and you don't have too much years of experience, they rather see a very small kind of a corner or a couple of rooms that is unbelievably well polished, and that tells them a lot more about, okay, this guy can hit our visual bar, he knows how to work smart, he knows pretty much a good chunk of how many people it takes to make a game rather than to try and do everything himself. And I think that's, and again, just being smart about what you're doing as opposed to just trying brute force and have these crazy ambitions that you will never be able to execute.
That's really interesting, what you were saying there with the small enclosures, because I guess a lot of what I see in environment art or concept art is those big grand vistas. If you do play a lot of video games, probably 80% in a lot of games would be indoors and in small enclosed environments. So that's really interesting. Can I just ask, with that project that you guys were working really hard on, Joel, you've been friends on Facebook for a while now. Was that project that I saw ages ago?
It was the cathedral environment. It's like a wintry, snowy kind of landscape with mountains everywhere, and this temple kind of resting at the very top of it. And there's like a city at the bottom of the mountain range and everything. I don't know if you've seen that or not.
No, I don't think I did. I think it was something else. But was that in a game engine, and you were just trying to work out the workflows? I mean, what was the end goal of this project you were working on?
No, that wasn't a game engine. That was actually all pre-rendered.
I don't think we knew what we were doing.
We had no idea.
So we're just like, hey, let's do something cool.
Yeah, it was.
Darren, I think you're talking about the project. Was it like it's almost like a sunset with some trees?
Oh, yeah, that
and
one.
A city that you
I
saw?
think there was a city one. Yeah, there was a city one, and I think there was cop cars and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to talk about it?
Okay. That was actually a much more smaller environment. Much more controlled. And so it's a project we did as an independent study. Well, I think we were still in college with the chair of our game department. So he was a guy who worked in the video game industry for like I don't know how many years, and so he was shepherding us through the entire process. And I think one of the biggest things to take away from that is that even though it's like most games, unless it's like something like Skyrim Open World, it's about creating the illusion of scale. Just pretty much it's just a lot of smokes and mirrors rather than to brute force your way through and create this a super detailed city with like street lights and lampposts in every single corner. It's just about figuring out it's more just having to do with game design. It's like talk to your game designers like, hey, this is where the player's gonna play, and then do everything else that the player's not gonna interact with. Just do smokes and mirrors. Just cheat your way through it.
And I think that that comes down to a lot of pre-planning. I think some people go straight into execution, whereas if you spend more time in pre-production and planning out exactly what you're going to do, you save yourself a lot of headache later on. That's something we learned through a lot of the projects we worked on too. I think people need to put more emphasis on pre-production planning than just going straight into execution.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, that's something that carries over to illustration and more 2D work. Is if you spend more time sketching and thumbnailing, you're going to have a lot easier time when you do the final.
Yeah.
Than the people that just like dive straight into the painting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what you're talking about with environment design, if you don't have to model the undersides of certain things because you know that you're never going to see them, that's going to save a significant amount of time. Did you guys sort of study any sort of like architecture or anything like that? Because it sounds like you're quite environment based.
In college, we had a lot of art history classes and learned about architecture through a lot of those kind of classes. So yeah, I've had like 7 or 9 art history classes and architectural classes. So yeah, I learned a lot of it through that. How about you?
I think for me, I don't think I really paid attention all that much to my art history. I'll just look at a style, look at an error, and be like, this is what cool technique I can pull from that. I think to do anything that's more urban related, I'll just go out, into the city and just look at, observe really carefully at some of like the most boring stuff that no one would ever look at. Like look at fire hydrants, look at the sidewalk, how it connects to the concrete, look at houses and how they're built. Just having a good understanding of visually how things are placed and designed, and try and kind of translate that into 3D. I think that a lot of people just start creating without doing any kind of research or planning ahead, and it's like at the end they're like, oh, how come this level doesn't look too good, or how come this level's not that fun? And at the end of the day, it just comes down to not knowing how to start well.
Yeah, I think the mundane stuff that you're talking about, a lot of people. I mean, there's a big. I suppose you could easily go spend a lot of time on the big, fantastical stuff. It's the little mundane details that lets the everyman, like me and you and everyone else, connect to the actual scene, and that's when it feels real. And if it's not quite there, we've got this visual bank since we were born. I mean, as long as you're not blind, since we were born, and we can pick things out relatively quickly. And if something doesn't feel right. So I think what you're saying is actually quite important. Picking out the mundane things, the things that we can attach to as common people. So you guys are obviously in a studio at the moment. Did you want to talk about, because I know, Joey, you're looking at possibly doing an MBA, which is quite a big, massive step. Congratulations. on that
Thank
front. What do you sort of see for yourself in the next, say, 15 years in your careers?
I would say in the next 15 years, I eventually like to work my way up to a lead of a sort over a team. Maybe in, for example, I focus heavily on lighting, and my second skill set would be like modeling for environments. But maybe over a small team of lighters. But if I'm not in a studio, the purpose of the masters is because I'm interested in starting up my own freelancing business, and I want to have a better sense of that side of the industry, because like while making art is great, without any business sense, like how do you make a living off of it? So I'm taking that pretty seriously, and that's why I'm interested in going for my master's in that. And then also, eventually, when I get too old and I don't want to pull all-nighters working on this kind of stuff anymore, maybe working my way up into like a management position, maybe at Microsoft or something, because I like it up here. So it's mainly for me and my future endeavors.
Yeah, and it's important as well. Like if you wanted to move up to those positions to get that experience, in my opinion, externally, because a lot of the time, if you are a studio artist, you are necessarily blocked from that. You don't really see a lot of that sort of stuff behind the scenes. So to get a lot of that experience, you almost have to go outside of like what you're doing.
Exactly. We were in the middle of trying to start our own business right now and everything, but we realized that, while that may or may not be successful, we decided it was a little bit wiser decision that we both kind of more focused on. All right, maybe we need to get more knowledgeable in business first before we attempt this. It comes back down to the pre-planning, not just with art, but I feel anything in life. If you're going to take a huge step on something as serious as this, you really need to plan everything out before you just dive into the deep end.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, it's really true. Yep. Sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm just gonna add a little bit, saying that getting a job at 343 was an unbelievably calculated move on our half that probably took about, I'm gonna say, half a year to execute. But I think during that time, it's just patience and keep going and understanding, like I guess like sometimes even thinking outside of the box. And at the end of the day, just believe that it's gonna happen. And if I don't get into 343, then maybe some other studio will give me an offer. And
honestly,
you were saying, Phil, that took half a year or more of calculated endeavor. How do you keep your momentum and your enthusiasm up for that? Because that is a very, very long time. Yeah.
I think it's a little bit about just being dissatisfied with the current projects I was working on at the time. I think that for me, I think it's like if you want something and you want it badly enough, that in it of itself will be all the motivation that you need. And obviously, having friends and having being active in the art community, looking at what are some of the cool stuff other people's doing, that will also create a drive for you. But sometimes it can definitely be hard, and there's certain days where you wake up and I'm just like, man, I don't want to work on my craft anymore. But I think it's through those difficult times to just keep pushing and realizing, hey, if I keep going, eventually I'm going to be good enough to work somewhere on a project that I find really, really cool and that will really satisfy my artistic needs.
Yeah, I would say that sometimes trying to be a professional artist, you got to separate your emotions from your actual goals sometimes, in the sense that if you wake up and you don't feel that you want to work that day on your craft, it's not about whether you feel it or not, it's about where you want to end up going. So that's something else. Beyond just separating out your emotions sometimes from your end goal, I also feel like I'm not saying like you have to be disillusional, but like you have to believe that you can make it. Like you have to have I think that's actually the most important trait you have. You have to believe that you can actually do it and that you will eventually make it. Because I was going through some pretty tough times last year trying to secure a job and everything else, and with all this stuff that was causing me stress and everything, it's like the one thing I didn't do is give up, because it's like, no, I'm going to see through it. I'm going to make it. I believe I can. And I think creating your own internal drive and fire is going to get you a lot further along in life than what a lot of people think. You got to be internally motivated more than externally in that sense.
Oh, I totally agree. No, that's fantastic. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. I look back at my student days, and I was dumb enough to think that I could make it. And like in hindsight, I realized how bad my chances were of actually making it. But at the time, I was totally gung ho. I was like, oh yeah, totally, I'm gonna make it. I'm gonna be super professional. I'm gonna do all this awesome stuff. And I think that's a good attitude to kind of take on it. I really liked what you guys were saying about how you're planning your things with freelance, and you're planning your kind of business education and stuff like that. Because I think a lot of guys that kind of go the freelance route as opposed to the in-house think that they can sort of ride on their art skills to get them everything they want. And while it's true that, yeah, like probably a few guys can, like if you're Craig Mullins, he probably doesn't need to advertise that much. He can update his website and we all talk about it. He doesn't even have to post that he updated his website. We'll just like know somehow. So like if you're that amazing, you probably can ride on that. But for the rest of us that aren't Craig Mullins, we do need to have that like education of like, all right, how do we get our work out there? How do we promote ourselves? How do we market ourselves? How do we like approach all the clients we want to work for? How do we figure out all this stuff that a lot of people just kind of take for granted that's going to magically happen? And so I'm impressed with you guys that you're really like looking into this stuff and really researching it. And I think that's a good lesson to kind of take away from that.
And it's good because you don't kind of pigeonhole yourselves into just an artist. You guys are both pushing far outside of that, and in my opinion, that's a fantastic thing that a lot of other creators could definitely take on board. All the marketing and all that, that's pretty damn important these days.
Yeah, it's super important. I swear I'm like a pretty good artist, but I'm really good at marketing. So that's kind of how I've ran things so far. I really liked also what you guys were saying about setting goals and knowing where you want to go, because I know I could not have gotten to where I am today without those goals. Like I remember in art school, I had specific goals for every year, including graduation and a year after graduation. And since then, I've set yearly goals of like, by the end of the year, I want to have accomplished all of this. And even if I don't accomplish every single thing, I do pretty well at accomplishing them. I get pretty close. Sometimes I surpass them. But just sort of having that sort of map of where you want to go, I think helps with just your daily work and stuff. Because all of a sudden, your daily painting or whatever isn't just doing another painting. It's one step towards that big goal that you've got in mind for this year.
In terms of practicality, how did you keep an eye on your goals? Did you write them down? Did you commit them to memory?
I wrote them all down. I still actually have them all my yearly goals. It's all in the same file, and I actually just every year I'll add another list. By the end of 2015, I'll want all of this. And I've got my goals for 2014, and every once in a while I'll open up that file and check on like, okay, what were my goals?
Yep.
Have I hit them yet? Am I kind of on the path to hitting them?
Yep.
And I'll just make sure every year I've got those goals set down of where I want to go, where I want to push things.
Yeah, I definitely have something similar. How about you guys? Did you guys keep track like that as well?
Actually, yes, and it's kind of funny that just the other day we were prioritizing exactly what do we want to do with our lives, because we have this issue that sometimes Phil and I get a little too ambitious, and then we realize, oh, this is not going to work because there's not enough hours in the day. So it's we actually spent some time to kind of truncate what was not necessary versus what we can and cannot do, and find areas where we can combine similar ideas into like one task. Being more efficient with our time, and we even micromanage those details. Like, okay, when are we like? We go to bed like 12, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, and we get to sleep in some because we have to be at work by 10. But we're like, okay, how can we not feel tired anymore? Like we usually will do martial arts or work out something late in the middle of the near midnight or 1 o'clock, whatever, and then like, okay, we're too wide awake right now. This is not working. So we decided it's like, well, let's reorganize our time. We'll wake up early in the morning instead, do our exercise then to help us wake up, and also no electronics first hour in the morning because you get too distracted, caught up with all that stress, and that kind of sets your mood for the rest of the day. So when you're talking about the idea of success and prioritizing your life and goals and everything, it's not just about the big things. It also comes down to the little tiny things in your life too, and how you handle that stuff. Because it's like, well, do you make up your bed in the morning or do you not? Do you do the best you can when you're doing the dishes or not? It's like it's an attitude you carry about every aspect in your life. And I think that's how you become successful.
Yeah, it definitely permeates everything, I think, for a lot of people. Yeah. Fantastic. So we'll probably be winding up soon. Did you guys have any questions? Did you want to ask? I think remember seeing some from you guys as well.
Yeah, sorry, we lost all your questions when we went to the screen of death. Yay.
I think you have a list. See, we even have a list with us. Hey.
I mean, I think the first question I always wanted to ask was, working in-house and, being freelance is, for me, I go to work, there's a lot of artists here. We can chat about art, we can talk about technique, we can argue about what looks good, what doesn't, what's right and what's not. And I really definitely feel there is a huge sense of, artistic community, even though we're in like a corporate building. And, that pushes me as an artist to do better and to kind of go above and beyond what I normally, think is my best. I understand that as freelancers, more often than not, it can be, pretty lonely journey where you're not in a position where there's a lot of, artists around to kind of receive that kind of feedback. And so I was just wondering, like, what do you guys do to, I guess, create or have that sense of artistic community, or just somebody to kind of, feed off of creatively?
I definitely think it's hard. I've never had the experience of working in-house. I've had a few job offers, but in the end I kind of went the freelance route. And it can be hard because honestly what you're talking about is the one thing I really feel like I'm missing out on from working that, of having that kind of artistic community. Because that was my favorite thing about going to art school, was going into the studios and working with everyone and having all these artists around me doing all this amazing work and all kind of pushing for that same direction. And so I really miss that doing the freelance thing, because I sit on my computer and I paint and there's no one around. And so it can be kind of tricky to kind of keep that motivation that you feel from being surrounded by other artists. Definitely the internet plays a role. Facebook for me is entirely art-based. I've got a few friends that aren't artists that are on there, but mostly it's just a bunch of artists. So I'll scroll through there and I'll see what everybody's doing, and I'll see amazing art that people are producing, and that will definitely be a motivation to improve. It's not the same as being around these people, but it's a nice thing. The thing for me that's sort of fed it has been conventions and workshops. Actually going and spending a few days and hanging out with people and getting inspired like that. I make sure that I go out of my way to experience that, just because it does give me that concentrated dose of, all right, there are other people out there doing this, we're all doing it kind of together, and I got to step up my game because everyone's awesome. And so that's sort of how I've managed it. At times I've done other things that are more concentrated. I was part of a critique group for a number of years, and that was a really good thing. A small group of professionals that all critiqued each other's work, and that was a really fun time. I might start up another one of those again sometime in the future. But it's definitely hard. That's probably one of the harder things. But I guess you kind of have to learn to thrive on being alone, oddly enough. But what about you, Darren? You've had both experiences.
Yeah, so I've been in the studio and freelance for about half of my career. I've been doing this for about 10 years now, it's definitely challenging, like Noah and you guys have sort of alluded to. I find that for myself, being inspired by the artwork, I go to various forums every now and then, or websites, just to have a look at things. Things like CG Society. I still love looking at. I think there's a couple of new portfolio sites where a lot of people put their new work up, like ArtStation and that. And I love looking at that stuff. But also, there's a lot of opportunity to that wasn't there before, where you can connect to people at other studios, where we can actually share behind-the-scenes work that we wouldn't put publicly. Like I've shared some of my work, and they've shared some of their work, and it's like, don't post this on the internet. But it's cool to see what people are doing behind the scenes, because it's often quite different from what people are putting out there on the internet, because obviously you want to put your best foot forward. So seeing sketches and that sort of thing behind the scenes is actually really cool. I don't feel that alone at home, because I'm sure you all know I've got a family, my wife and a young child, and they keep me company pretty well the whole day. And yeah, so that doesn't really get too lonely. And things like sketch group, I haven't actually been to a sketch group with you.
Yeah, you never go.
Yeah, I'm always so busy. But yeah, sketch group I used to go quite a bit. I'll probably start again pretty soon. Getting out of the house, I'll also go to the gym and that sort of thing. Yeah, I think it's important to get out of the studio as much as possible and connect with other people. I mean, I haven't really done the conventions and that sort of thing as much, but I'd really like to, because I've been around certain events like that, and just the buzz you get from being around other creative people, it's just pretty cool.
Yeah, I think that's one issue that people outside of the States would have, in that the States are loaded with conventions, both art and otherwise, and they're huge and amazing. Whereas other places, not much. I mean, there ain't a lot of art conventions in Australia.
So that's why we've always got to like set things up on our own to be able to meet with other artists.
Oh, for sure.
So.
But definitely people in the States are spoiled. At this point, now that I'm kind of living down here for a while, I'm, putting a significant investment into regularly flying back to the States for conventions, because I don't want to feel that disconnected from everything that's going on, and I don't want to lose that sort of buzz that you do get from going and attending those things.
Yeah. Does that sort of answer your questions?
Yeah, it does.
Do you have, what else do we have on the list?
Let's see. Since I know a lot of artists, are pretty driven by, you want to work on cool projects in addition to kind of paying the bills. And I was wondering, like, if, a company comes along and say, hey, here is a really cool IP and with, a lot of pay, like, would you guys ever consider going back and working in-house again? Or is that something kind of, like, not going to happen?
If Bethesda calls me up and says that I get to art direct the next Elder Scrolls game, I am down. Just so you know, I've talked to the concept artist there at Bethesda, and sort of kind of talked about getting a job there, but that's about one of the only properties that I'd consider going back for. There are, maybe a couple others that I'd go for, maybe if they want me to do all the environment design for the next Final Fantasy game, yeah, I'd be down. But, like, aside from those insane AAA titles, I'm not terribly interested, just because I really like the freelance thing, and it's really nice. I've sort of never had a real job in my life, and I don't know if I necessarily could. The idea of going to work every day is just baffling to me, and I don't know. I don't know if I could handle it or not. And so aside from those insane jobs, those insane dream jobs, I doubt it. What about you?
Yeah, well, I've obviously been in studios before, so there is actually quite a lot I do like about studios, and one of them is, as you guys said, there's a bit of a feeling of camaraderie and being in in an environment where you get to push your art a little bit more. You've got other people that inspire you, so there's a possibility that I'd do that. But at the same time, I've spent so much time developing all the structures and the frameworks for my freelance life that essentially I'd have to give that all up. And if I ever wanted to do it again, I'd have to start from the beginning, and it takes a long time to get those things set up. And to be perfectly frank, I really love the freelance life as well. I love being able to, say, visit Noah in the middle of the day. We've got a friend who's got an art place, and we just go and visit him in the middle of the day, in the middle of the week. And that's just a level of freedom that it's really difficult to achieve in a studio environment that needs you for core hours at least. So it'd be really tough to kind of, go back to that, I think. Also, my office is set up exactly how I want it to be, and to be perfectly honest, I don't think anyone would give me a studio office that would be able to match it. So that would be kind of tough as well, I think. I just have all my toys around me, and I can play with them whenever I want. So.
Yeah. I remember one time I got offered a job at a studio, and it's a great studio, great people, amazing project I was going to be on, all that stuff. And the thing is, I really like traveling, and so I honestly asked them if they would be okay with multiple month-long vacations during the year. And they were like, that's a little extreme. So that's the sort of freedom that freelance has given me. I can take a month off and go somewhere and see awesome things, and that sort of freedom is really hard to give up once you've got it.
The other thing that because Noah's a big traveler and he loves traveling. Whereas I don't really have that as much. Maybe it's because I traveled a little bit when I was a kid, so I don't really have that bug as much. But what I do find is, even just with the Nomad, that's a fairly visible project. But I'm working on lots of individual projects on the side as well. And when you're in an environment, I don't think it's good form to be working on that stuff and talking to suppliers and all that sort of stuff during the day when you should be doing work for other people. So I think just ethically, I don't think I think it'd be impossible for me to do things like the Nomad and my other side projects if I wanted to. It's just a matter of practicality, I think. So,
Did you have another? Did we have?
No, just like one other thing I guess is for Noah, because I don't know. It seems like there was a lot of opportunity for us to like meet up like when you were in the States. It just somehow
Were you ever at a convention I was at?
Well, I was busy at that time, and then when you were at SCAD, I didn't find out about it until like.
Oh, I remember that time.
Yeah, like they
Wait, you guys were at SCAD and didn't come to my talk?
We were in the same town at one time.
It was a good talk. I even like demoed the whole next day. I was like critiquing people, and yeah, it was fun.
Why didn't you tell us you were there?
I told everyone. I told the whole internet. I was at SCAD. I don't know. Oh well.
You know we're gonna hold this against you.
I don't know. Come to the convention sometime. We'll hang out.
Noah's going to be back in the US before long anyway.
Yeah,
So.
I'll be back there soon. This is definitely not a permanent move down here. It's fun for a while, but
Just doesn't like the internet.
yeah, the internet, awful here. I mean, oh my god. But yeah, aside from that, it's fun.
How long does it take to upload an art chat?
Oh god, it takes like hours to upload my demos,
Yeah.
and I'm used to like, I don't know, for these tiny demos, 20 minutes maybe. No, it's gonna take like 4 hours. I've had videos take like 8 hours to upload.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think I've got a slower internet than Noah, so when I have to upload these videos, it'll take the entire day for me. So
it's ridiculous. So,
mm-hmm.
Any other questions or thoughts or things you wanted to talk about, or?
I think we should like definitely try and meet up like sometime in the future, at like a workshop.
Yeah,
or something.
sure.
Yeah,
I will come hang out at 343.
Yeah, I'll be coming to the stage at some stage as well. I'd love to come meet up with you guys. I mean, it's been fantastic talking with you, and it's so refreshing hearing the mentalities that you guys have. You're obviously both fairly young. How old are you? How old are you guys?
28.
26.
Okay, a little older than I thought, but yeah, it's just fantastic hearing your mentality, and I think you guys are going to go really far. So, and I can't wait to see where you take things.
Thanks. It was a lot of fun talking with you guys. And just chilling out and learning some stuff from you, and just bouncing ideas off of each other.
Yeah, definitely. It was a really cool talk. Really
Yeah.
enjoyed myself.
No worries.
It's been fun.
Activity.
Where can people find your stuff?
Oh, I guess we should share.
Do you want us to just say it out loud or share some links with you?
Say it out loud, and I'll also type it in the thing afterwards.
Okay. So my website is polyplant, POLYPLANT.co. That's where you can find my stuff. And then Phil.
You can find my work at the-last-pixel.com.
Cool.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Just to let you know, our website's a little outdated because we're in studio, can't show what we're doing right now, but you get to see some of the older stuff we've been doing.
Yeah, it's not too updated.
Exactly. Come on.
Actually, that raises a good point. Like, if you wanted to continue showing off some of the work and your new skills, what would you guys have to do? I mean, for myself, I always work on side projects so I can show, even if it's little sketches or whatever. Is that what you guys do as well?
For us, side projects, they do take longer to do only because, you're in house, and so, a good chunk of your day is taken up doing someone else's IP. So we do side projects, and then, like, as far as the other stuff we can show you, we have to wait till the game ships.
Yeah, cool. Well, it's been a lot of fun. We'll hang out sometime, and, yeah, cool.
Take care, guys.
That's good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
See you
later.
Take care.